I've been thinking a lot about the perfection of generosity, and 2 weeks ago I started off by talking about the generosity of giving material things and giving our time, and last week I spoke about offering protection from danger and fear. So the last category in this is giving the Dharma, which is the best gift of all. And so we may say right off the bat, well, that's great. I'll leave that to His Holiness and Venerable Children and all those other people who are really realized beings, and I'll just continue, doing what I can. But actually, even if we've read a paragraph, if we've done, been to one Dharma talk, we actually have something to offer. We really do. And so it would be actually quite selfish of us not to have what we offer in any opportunity when we have this. So I thought I'd start off with a quote from Geshe Sopa, and he says this: "The perfection of generosity is a mind perfectly free of attachment and stinginess, that joyfully, without any hesitation, wants to give." The Buddhist practice of generosity is training the mind, not the physical act of giving. So it all comes back to, our motivation and our intention whenever we're in a situation where the possibility of giving in any way can come up. So obviously, in this category of giving the Dharma, it's giving a Dharma talk, it's giving a teaching, it could be leading a meditation, it could be all those things which, are fantastic. I mean, it's planting the seeds in anyone who hears it, any living being. And it could be just like sitting down with a friend who's troubled and, they've asked you for your input on something, so they've got some problem. And, depending on our skill level, and I think we have to be careful with this, but, with our skill level, we can maybe offer something from a Dharma point of view. And so if we are with our friend and they're wanting to sort of engage in the typical thing that we all do, unless we're, really practicing, is blaming. And we can steer the conversation away from blame and, just really sort of give them a more balanced perspective. Even that is offering the Dharma. We always encounter people who are grieving. So maybe there's a loved one who's very, very sick. Maybe someone has just died. Maybe their pet has died, and they're really in a really sorrowful, painful state. And, again, with even the little bit of Dharma that we have, there are things we can do to console our friend. And if, in the first conversation we feel like we really didn't, do much for that suffering, we can always do some reading. There's all kinds of information online. You can go to tuptenchildren.org. There's a whole section on helping those deal with dying and those who have died. So there's a lot of resources available when we get interested. We can just do things like encourage our friends in their practice. It's quite easy to get discouraged at certain points in our practice. And so when we see this happening with other people, we can, just point out, hey, it looks like you're really getting bummed out here, so what's going on? And then just give them encouragement. It's really helpful if we're going out for a walk or anywhere to do our prayers out loud. That's easy to do here. I suppose it's a bit more difficult if you're in downtown Atlanta it's probably easy in Paris because there's all kinds of people talking to themselves there. But in any major city, you've got all kinds of people, talking to themselves. So why not be reciting mantra? Why not, be doing something like that? I can't see the pretas. I can see insects. I can see animals. And so when I'm out here, often I'm chanting out loud. So we're doing, these beings a favor, planting seeds in their mental continuum. And for those of us who have pets, I know the cats here get all kinds of teachings, they get all kinds of attention, and I know that everyone here is saying mantra to them. Again, it's just planting, seeds in their mental continuum. And how better to repay the kindness of our dear pets, in addition to feeding them and giving them food and loving them, but to give them the Dharma in that way. It's fantastic. So that's something to consider too. I remember one time, this is before I met the Dharma, a friend of mine was sharing with me the fact that she felt at this time that if the right man came along, and she was married and she had 3 children, but if the right man came along, she would have an affair with him. And her reason was that it would help her spiritual practice. And at the time I heard this, I was stunned. I think my jaw just fell open, and I was just like, all I could say was, really? And at the time I had no tools, but I just had that reaction. And so she was sort of running this by me, I think, to get a reaction. And when she saw my shock, she said, well, what's wrong with that? And all I could sort of say was, well, what about your husband? What about your kids? Have you really thought this through? And she said, yes, I have. And if this is going to help my spiritual practice, I'm going to do it. So, in retrospect, I've thought about this conversation many times, and I would have approached this much differently. I mean, I still would probably have the reaction of shock, but I would have really, she was my friend. I could have gone this route. I would have really said, okay, let's play this one out a little bit further. Okay, you have the affair. Right. And then your husband finds out. Do you have an open marriage? Do you have an agreement about this? No. What's this going to do to your relationship? What's it going to do to your children? Do you think your children aren't going to clue in that something's going on between mom and dad? Do you want your family, do you want to have a divorce? Do you want this to all end? Do you want your kids to grow up, living in different households? I really would have laid it out, getting her to think about this aspiration for improving her spiritual life and to get some clarity on that. Anyway, do that with people you know well. Tread carefully with people who are maybe acquaintances. But be honest, I think that's important. Another good thing to do about sharing the Dharma is, if you're in a position to do this, making Dharma books available to other people. So you might want to sponsor a printing of a certain Dharma book. At the Abbey, we're in a position where we can send Dharma books to inmates. And some of the nuns here are actually going out and going into the prison and sharing the Dharma, which is fantastic. Back to sharing with family and friends. In my own experience, what I've found is most beneficial is waiting until they ask. Because the first time I went to a retreat, I came back fired up, and I was telling everybody about how great it was. I was telling my colleagues at work, and for the first 5 minutes, there was interest. After that, it was like, oh, gotta go. And so you have to be sort of skillful in knowing what people's interest level is and really what they want to hear. So I wait now until people ask. And then I think probably the best way of sharing the Dharma with family and friends, if they're not asking, is just to be an example. Just to, maybe they're going to notice that you're being more careful around living beings, for example. I'll never forget the first time it was a family gathering. We were at a cabin at the lake, and the place was filled with flies, and they were handing out the fly swatters. And I said, wait a minute, let me just do this for a while. So I got out the cup and the piece of paper, and the conversations that were happening in the cabin all ground to a halt. There was total silence. And so I thought, I don't care, they can watch me do this. So I went around, gathering up all the flies and mosquitoes, having about 20 pairs of eyes watch me do this. Well, this got to be a habit, and pretty soon, instead of fly swatters coming out, it would be, would you go take care of that? And then I never thought this would happen, because I got a lot of teasing about this, friendly teasing, but teasing still. I think it was about 2 years ago, my sister Cheryl, who works in a medical clinic, was telling me that she was starting to scoop out the wasps and the hornets in the medical clinic. And she said at first it got that kind of reaction too. It was like, huh? And then eventually all of the doctors were referring to her as the insect whisperer. Okay, go tell Cheryl. There's another wasp over there. So, at first they were sort of like curious. They didn't really rib her too much because they really like her there. But then they came to respect what she was doing. So you never know the impact that will have on people. And it's not like you have to announce, like, oh, okay, now I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go save a wasp. But just do it. And people notice. And they may have an adverse reaction at first. But after a while, I think it has an impact. So there's many ways of practicing this gift of generosity. We can, when we're able to, we can give material things. We can give of our time, which is a wonderful gift. We can offer, be with someone when they're feeling fearful. We can do things that help people if they're looking like they're in a state of danger, particularly animals and insects. And we can offer the Dharma at whatever level we're at. So I'd like to end with a quote from the Compendium of Perfections. Therefore the wise praise generous giving, but childish people enjoy accumulating things. Grasping never prevents anything from being lost. Giving always brings excellent results. And with that last line, giving always brings excellent results. Try it out and see for yourself.